For millennia, humanity lived by the rhythm of the sun. You woke up when the light reached your window. You rested when it vanished over the horizon. In the winter you worked less. In the summer, more. Time belonged to you. Or at least it belonged to nature. It belonged to no man. In an 18th century English village, a grandson used the same tools as his grandfather. Fabric was spun by hand. Iron was struck by a hammer, piece by piece. All the energy available to move the world came from muscles, wind, and rivers. It was slow. It was limited. And that limitation defined absolutely everything. How many people could be fed, how many cities could exist, and how fast a nation could grow. The scarcity of energy was the fundamental law of civilization. It had always been that way. It always would be. Or so they thought. The Industrial Revolution was not just a collection of inventions. It was the moment humanity discovered how to release the energy stored in the earth over 300 million years. The coal buried deep underground, and converted into work, movement, and production. For the first time in history, the work that took a man a day to complete could be done by a machine in an hour. The rhythm of nature was replaced by the rhythm of the factory, and the world we know today. The cities, the trains, mass production, the global economy, the warming of the planet. It all begins there. Why Great Britain? Why not France, which was larger and more populous? Why not China, which for centuries was the most advanced civilization in the world? The answer lies in 5 factors that, by an extraordinary historical coincidence, converged in the same place at the same time. Think of them as the pieces of a lock. You need all of them for the door to open. Agricultural productivity played a key role. The enclosure movement forced millions of peasants off the land. New techniques caused food production to skyrocket. As a result, fewer people were needed to work the fields, and a mass of landless workers migrated to the cities. Factories would find the army of cheap labor they required right there. Political stability and the rule of law were equally vital. After 1688, contracts were honored. Property was protected. The patent system guaranteed that an inventor could profit from their creation. An entrepreneur could invest knowing the state would not confiscate their wealth. Geographical advantage was another factor. No point in England is more than 70 miles from the sea. The country was crisscrossed by navigable rivers and man-made canals. Coal from the mines reached the factories at a cost that no continental nation could match. A culture of scientific experimentation also emerged. The Royal Society created a unique environment where scientists and artisans exchanged knowledge. Science was practical. Practice was scientific. Finally, there was the most counterintuitive factor: high wages and cheap energy. England had high wages by European standards. At the same time, coal was abundant and inexpensive. This combination created an unparalleled incentive. Replacing expensive human labor with cheap fossil fuel energy made financial sense. In Great Britain, the math worked perfectly. 5 pieces, 1 lock, and the door was about to open. Before the factories, textile production was family work. A merchant would provide the raw cotton, women would spin the yarn, and men would weave on looms. It was slow, but it preserved a certain autonomy. The rhythm was set by the family. A skilled weaver took pride in the craft. It was an identity. That world was about to disappear forever. With the expansion of the East India Company, Indian fabrics flooded British markets. They were finer, cheaper, and more colorful. Protection came through laws, but the challenge was now different: to produce faster than ever before. And for that, they needed machines. What followed was one of the most fascinating chains of innovation in history, where each invention solved one problem and created another. In 1733, The flying shuttle doubled the speed of looms but consumed yarn too quickly. In 1764, the spinning jenny solved the yarn bottleneck. In 1769, the water frame used water power, but the machine was too large to fit in a home. For the first time, production had to go to the machine, not the other way around. The factory began to exist as an idea. In 1779, the spinning mule combined everything, and production exploded. In less than 50 years, the domestic work that had sustained families for centuries was eliminated. Where there was once the organic rhythm of the family, there was now the mechanical rhythm of the machine. Where the weaver was once an artisan with pride in his craft, he was now an operative. This was the moment when work ceased to be an identity and became a commodity. The history of the steam engine begins with an urgent problem. The mines were drowning. As miners dug deeper, groundwater accumulated. Horses pulled buckets all day long, but when the depth became too great, they couldn't keep up. In 1712, Thomas Newcomen built the first functional machine. It was inefficient, but in the mines coal was abundant, and that was enough. The decisive leap came in 1769 with James Watt. He realized the machine was losing most of its energy and added a separate condenser. Efficiency tripled. In 1782, Watt converted the piston's movement into continuous rotary motion. Now the steam engine could turn anything: a loom, a press, a forge hammer. It had freed itself from the mines. The world would never be the same. To build machines, iron was needed, but the process used charcoal and required the deforestation of entire forests. The solution came when Abraham Darby discovered that coke could replace charcoal. Iron and steam began to feed each other. It was a cycle that accelerated on its own. In 1779, the first symbol of this new world was erected: the Iron Bridge, a manifesto in metal of the world that was being born. In 1750, Manchester had 25,000 inhabitants. By 1850, it had 300,000. In a single generation, cities grew more than they had in entire centuries. And the cities were not ready. Friedrich Engels described what he saw with clinical precision: single-room houses where 10 people slept, black rivers of sewage and industrial dyes. Life expectancy in Manchester was only 28 years. The wealth produced in these factories was real and visible, but the distance between the industrialists and the workers was greater than that between a medieval noble and his serf. One of the most profound changes was the transformation of time. In the countryside, time was organic. In the factory, time was mechanical. A bell at 5:30, another at 6. Anyone who arrived after the second bell paid a fine. Shifts lasted up to 16 hours. This was industrial time discipline, a change in human psychology. The generation that grew up in the factories learned to measure themselves by the clock. We are the direct heirs of this. In 1833, it was documented that 5-year-old children were working in coal mines. Their job was to sit in the dark for 12 hours, opening and closing a ventilation door, alone, in absolute silence. Older children were sent into chimneys, where their small bodies could fit. Many developed cancer while still young. This was not an exceptional abuse. It was the system functioning normally. When we talk about progress, there is a number that must be said. By 1840, 40% of the British textile workforce was under 18. For the system to work, it needed veins. First came the canals, reducing transport costs by 70%. Then came the railroad. In 1830, the Liverpool-Manchester line carried passengers at 30 miles per hour. For those who had never moved faster than a horse, it was unsettling. The railroad created the need for standardized time. Before, each city had its own local time. For the trains to work, The country adopted Greenwich Mean Time. Time stopped being local and became national. Great Britain tried to keep the secret, but knowledge cannot be held by borders. The model spread. Belgium was first, followed by France. Germany industrialized with state power, and the United States expanded from coast to coast. Japan transformed a feudal society into an industrial power in just 50 years. For the rest of the world, the revolution arrived as a demand for raw materials. Cotton, rubber, copper. The world was reorganized to feed European factories. And this reorganization left marks that still define 21st century geopolitics today. Not everyone accepted this in silence. Groups of workers invaded factories at night and destroyed machines with sledgehammers. They were the Luddites. They were not ignorant. They were artisans who saw their income and identity being destroyed. The government responded with extreme harshness, making sabotage a capital crime. The movement was crushed, but resistance transformed. Workers began to organize into unions and new ideas were born. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels observed British factories and created a theory to explain them. 20th century socialism is a direct child of the Industrial Revolution. Meanwhile, poets and painters idealized nature. Romanticism was a reaction of horror to what industrialization was doing to the world. From 1870 onward, electricity, steel, and oil accelerated everything again. Then came the computer revolution, and now, perhaps, the era of artificial intelligence. Each carries the same questions. What system is being built? Who will pay the price? There is a profound irony at the heart of all this. Humanity found a way to free itself from energy scarcity, to produce food for billions, and to cure diseases. But the fuel that made all this possible had accumulated in the earth for 300 million years. We burned it in 200. Global warming is not an accident. It is the most direct result of the Industrial Revolution. The same equation that freed us from scarcity created the crisis that will define the 21st century. When you look at the world you live in, the city you inhabit, the clock you obey, the work you do, remember, all of this was built in less than 200 years by people who had no idea what they were creating. And we, who do know, must decide what to do with this inheritance. If this video made you think about how the world was built, share it with someone who needs to hear this. In the next video, we will explore where this system failed for the first time. See you there.